Hey guys, so today I want to talk a little bit about what happens when you mess up your rotation as a Knight's Edge Soul Eater. Both what happens to your damage, but also what you should do in those situations when you mess up your rotation. Should you use X skill, Y skill, Z skill, or should you save them for later? That way you don't mess up your rotation in Deathlord or Soul Snatch mode, right? And I think a lot of that question really revolves around this skill right here, lethal spinning. There's a lot of talk, at least in my circles, right? That lethal spinning, you definitely should not use this to try to fill up your meter to get into Soul Snatch mode because you ideally want to get 2 lethal spinnings out in Soul Snatch mode. And the window, some people say the window's tight. I don't think it's that tight, but that's kind of the philosophy around it, right? So I think there's in my head before I did all these tests, it's like, should I use lethal spinning to get that empowered pink skill to push me into Soul Snatch mode? Well, I ran quite a few tests and I have some results that I want to share with you. As you can see here on this spreadsheet, I did damage test on the normal rotation. So if I didn't mess anything up, I did damage test on if I used lethal spinning right before heading into Soul Snatch mode. And then I used all of the purple skills, the gas skills, right? I had all these skills on cooldown before heading into Soul Snatch mode. Because Soul Snatch mode, what it does, if you didn't know, is that it decreases the cooldowns of those skills. So when you use them in that mode, your cooldowns are going to be lowered, and then also it increases your crit chance, your I think move speed, and also your damage on those skills. So ideally, you want to be able to maximize your damage or maximize your purple skills, your gas skills in that mode. So if you went into that mode with all on cooldown, they wouldn't get the cooldown reduction, and as a result, your damage would likely be decreased, right? Well, it's not as cut and dry as I thought it would be. The numbers were looking a little bit weird, and I really needed to rack my brain around this because, like, if you look at it here, right? Yes, the normal rotation right here, in general, it did the most damage. And these two afterwards did less damage. But it's weird because sometimes they did very comparable damage, if not more. Like, for example, this one right here. This was a 10.8 mil DPS, and this is a 10.9 mil DPS. Over here, we had some 11 mil DPSs, and then I even did additional tests because I just thought it was very weird, and the numbers ended up even higher. So I'm like, what is going on here? Why is there such a big variance in the numbers? And we can see here, right, I compared and contrast the numbers, and they just looked very weird. And I kind of had a bit of an aha moment because even though you use your lethal spinning before going into Soul Snatch, right? Or you use all your blue skills before going into Soul Snatch. One, your blue skills other than your your lethal spinning, your blue skills other than your lethal spinning don't actually have that long of a cooldown. So even if you use them all before you go into Soul Snatch mode, usually your Lunatic Edge will come up, then your Rusted Nail will come up, then your Harvest will come up, and you just kind of cycle those back and forth until your Lethal Spinning comes up. But the other thing I've noticed is that the reason why sometimes the numbers are actually very comparable is because Harvest has a quick recharge rune on it, or at least I do on it, and I think most people do. In the meta build, you do. So if you end up proccing Harvest, the quick recharge on Harvest, you get a full lethal spinning in Soul Snatch mode, even though you didn't get to, even though you used it before you headed into Soul Snatch mode. And I think that is the big difference. Even though you're not using 2 lethal spinnings inside of Soul Snatch and you're only using 1, the difference is not that big, especially when you're just doing 1 rotation. If you look at this, right, I did a comparison for damage between lethal spinning with no transformation and lethal spinning with transformation, right? In the situations where you're using lethal spinning before, you're using 1 with in no and 1 with in the transformation if you proc that quick recharge. If you don't, you still get to fit it in at the end, but it just doesn't get a lot of the damage buffs, unfortunately. So what ends up happening is you use one before, then you use one during. So you're really only missing out on about 20 mil damage. And then sometimes you crit more, sometimes you crit less, and that just creates variance. And because of that, the difference in damage isn't actually that big, especially when you proc that quick recharge rune and you're able to get the full duration of lethal spinning within the soul snatch mode. And I'll show you right here. I'm gonna go try to proc quick recharge right now with with harvest, and you can see that the second lethal spinning will actually get the entire duration in soul snatch mode. So let's just demonstrate by doing a normal rotation. We're gonna do this. We're gonna awaken. And then before we head into soul snatch mode, we are going to be actually using our lethal spinning to put it on cooldown before we head into soul snatch. And then we're going to try to use our harvest to proc quick recharge. There we go. It finally it procced. And because of that, we are actually able to use a full duration of our, or pretty much entirely full duration of the lethal spinning. Sorry, I realized my big old head was blocking the damage numbers, but as you can see here, I pulled up separately. The damage numbers are pretty comparable. 465 mil damage total, 74% crit chance, 11.6 mil DPS. If we pull up our spreadsheet, you can see that this lines up with the normal rotation pretty well. And that is why a lot of times it doesn't really matter too much if you're missing out on your rotation or messing it up. Of course, there is variance, right? And depending on how much you mess it up, it can drop a lot. In that situation, really didn't mess it up too much, right? All we did was use lethal spinning before. But sometimes if the boss phases and you're not attacking it, and then with Knight's Edge, when you're not attacking it, your meter actually starts dropping, then that messes up your rotation even more, right? But again, luckily we do have kind of the great reset, which is our soul snatch mode. After we go into soul snatch and come out, all our skills are back. So our cooldowns, our rotations, everything is not messed up for too long. And it's usually only messed up for one rotation. So there it is. Feel free to use your lethal spinning, all your blue skills, whatever it, or your purple skills, whatever it might be, to fill up your meter when you miss out on you miss some of your attacks, some of the boss phases, things change, and your rotation gets messed up. At the end of the day, while it does affect your DPS, it mostly affects the consistency, I'd say. The ceiling is still pretty dang close to the original rotation, and you shouldn't be afraid to use things like lethal spinning to fill up your meter. So yeah, hopefully this video helped you guys out and gave you a little bit more confidence and just assurance that even when you do mess up your rotation, it's not like over. You can still save it, because I feel like in this game a lot of times it's very mental. When you mess things up, things get worse and worse and worse, because in your mind you're like, oh shoot, my DPS is dropping, things like that. But rest assured, your DPS is not dropping by that much, and it can always be made up later, right? So hopefully this video helped you out. If it did, remember, hit that like button, hit the sub button, ring the bell for notifications, and also I stream every night on Twitch. It's now twitch.tv/MisoXShiru. I changed the name because, I feel like some people were probably getting confused. But maybe I made it even more confusing now that I changed it back. But twitch.tv/MisoXShiru. And I also multi-stream on YouTube starting at 10 p.m. PST every night. So hopefully I'll see you on the streams. But if I don't, hopefully I'll see y'all on the next video. Peace out.